Today we're going to talk about rotations. Rotation in geometry is a circular turn around a fixed point. Sometimes we call it a spin or a turn. A rotation is a change in a figure's orientation only. The shape stays the same size and the same shape, and the angles stay the same, which is called congruent. Now we've got to know that there's two directions that something can turn. Just like on a clock, if a clock is moving, let's say it starts here in the top, and it moves in this direction, this is called clockwise, like the hands of a clock. If it starts going backwards, which we would love to do sometimes, turn time backwards, it's counterclockwise. So you need to know those two things. You will sometimes see notation that puts a negative sign in front of a degree, but we just use counterclockwise and clockwise here. All right, so let's talk about what directions mean and degrees. So if I were to start in quadrant 1 and I move this direction one quadrant, that's 90 degrees, and think about which way I'm moving, that's counterclockwise. If I continue on and move one more quadrant, that's 180 degrees, and this would be counterclockwise. If I continue to the fourth quadrant, that is 270 degrees counterclockwise. And then I can go back to my original starting point, and that will be 360 degrees, which will get me back to where I started. Now, if I'm going clockwise, the way the clock rolls, and I start no matter where I start, let's say this time I start here, and I move this direction, one quadrant over, that is 90 degrees clockwise. Then one more is 180. 180 degrees clockwise. Then 270. And back to where I started would be 360 degrees. Every circle has 360 degrees in it. So you need to know that 270 degrees clockwise is the same as saying 90 degrees counterclockwise. And 90 degrees clockwise is the same thing as saying 270 degrees counterclockwise. So if you know these rules and you know about 180, which we're going to talk about in a second, this becomes very simple when you don't have graph paper or you don't have patty paper to be able to figure out what the new coordinates will be for a shape. So the question you need to always ask before you start is, which quadrant will I end up in? So you got to know how many degrees you're turning. So once you know what quadrant you're ending up in, you look at your pre-image coordinates and you switch them, and this is when you're going 270 or 90 degrees, either direction, doesn't matter. You switch X and Y, and then you make sure the signs match the quadrant. So we're going to do an example of that in just a minute. The rule for 180 is if you're going 180 degrees, whether it's counterclockwise or clockwise, doesn't matter, you are going to look at the original pre-image coordinates X and Y. Then they are going to stay X and Y, but you're going to make sure that the signs for the numbers match the new quadrant. So let's do an example. Let's say we start here with A in this quadrant, and I see this is 1, 2, 3. So this coordinate is 2, 3. And I want to go 90 degrees counterclockwise. Well, that's backwards from a clock, so this would be going the wrong direction on a clock hands. So I'm going to go 90 degrees counterclockwise. Okay, so my rule when I'm going 90 degrees counterclockwise would be the same thing as saying 270 degrees clockwise. This is 90, 180, 270 clockwise. So that's the same thing. So I look at my original pre-image and I say, where am I going to end up? Well, I'm starting in quadrant 1. I'm going to end up in quadrant 2. And remember what your signs are in quadrant 2. My X's are always negative and my Y's are positive. And you have a little sheet that we did with this. So if I look and say, okay, well my original are 2 and 3, I'm going to switch them. So my A prime is going to end up being 3, 2. Now I've got to look and see if my signs match. Well, 3 is positive. Uh-oh, it needs to be negative. So I'm going to put a negative there. So I now know that my A prime is going to be negative 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and right here is going to be my A prime spot. So it's rotating around a fixed point. In our case, we rotate around the origin. All right, let's try another one. So point B has coordinates of negative 2, negative 4. So think about where that is. So if we think about our quadrant plane, 1, 2, 3, 4. We know this is plus plus. We know this is negative plus. This one is negative negative. And this one is plus negative for our signs. So if we start with a negative negative, we're starting in 3. So we're going to be starting in this section here. And we're going to rotate 270 degrees clockwise. So we're thinking about going clockwise. So we're going to go, do a new color. So we're going to go 90, 180, 90, 180, 270. So I'm going to end up in quadrant 4. And so I'm doing a 270. Remember, I switch X and Y. So this becomes negative 4, negative 2. And now I got to see, do they match my signs in there? Well, X has to be positive. So I have to take this negative away. So make it a positive 4. And then we can stay negative with our Y. So our coordinates of B prime is 4, negative 2. All right, let's try one more. Rotate point C, negative 4, 1, 180 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. Means around the origin. What are the coordinates for C prime? So if we think about where we are in our quadrant, negative 4, 1, negative 4s are this way, over here, and 1, we're somewhere around here. All right, so we started in here. We're going to go 180 degrees. And remember, it doesn't matter if we say 180 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise. If we go clockwise, 90, 180, or counterclockwise, 90, 180, regardless, we are going to end up in this quadrant right here, quadrant 4. Quadrant 4, we know, has signs of positive x's and negative y's. So all we have to do for this one is keep the same coordinates, the numbers, we'll look at the numbers, 4, 1, and we got to make sure the signs match. So the x has to be positive and the y has to be negative. All right, let's switch to showing you how to do some on patty paper. All right, so we've got a couple extensions. So we use patty paper. Remember, if you're at home, you can use other things. These will work on Con as well. So I'm going to start with this one right here. This is rotating 90 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. So we can make our origin a little more clear here. So you would take your patty paper. You want to have a registration mark. So go over your cross. And then you're going to rough sketch just quickly, best you can. And you want to label, this is S, B, and that one, can't see the little sign on it. Now we're going to rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise. Remember, counterclockwise is going this direction. So 90 degrees from where we start, this is 1, taking the whole quadrant and moving it. So we're going to spin our paper 1 turn. Line up our little registration marks, and this will be where our new one is. So we can bear hard over top. Pick our paper up. You might not be able to see it as well on mine. And then don't forget to label. This is S prime, B prime, and I'm not sure what they were calling that one. So this would be our rotation around the origin. So take some time to practice and make sure you write down all the rules and you'll do great.